This company started by hunting whales in the Antarctic. It ended up keeping Britain's supermarkets stocked, and then it quietly collapsed. Christian Salvesen pulled off one of the most unlikely pivots in British business history. At its peak, thousands of refrigerated trucks carried its name across Britain, serving Sainsbury's, Tesco and Asda. The company was essential to the national food supply, yet almost invisible to the public. By 2007, the name had vanished entirely. The real question is how a Norwegian immigrant's small Leith shipping firm became all of this in the first place. Leith in the mid-19th century was a place of constant movement, coal barges, timber ships, dockside cranes, and the sharp scent of salt and smoke in the air. Into this busy Scottish port arrived Christian Salvesen, a young Norwegian immigrant in 1851. He was just 24, but already familiar with the rhythms of shipping from his family's business in Mandal. Leith was the gateway for Scotland's trade with the North Sea, and the docks bustled with cargoes of coal, timber, iron and grain. It was here that Salvesen found both opportunity and challenge, as the city's fortunes rose and fell with the tides of Victorian commerce. The business began with partnerships, first with his brother Johan Theodore Salvesen, then with Edinburgh merchant George Vere Turnbull. By 1853, Christian had taken over the partnership, guiding the firm through the complex world of shipbroking and cargo handling. The company's ledgers from these years, now stored in Edinburgh's archives, show a steady trade. Norwegian timber arriving to build Scottish homes, coal and iron heading back across the North Sea, and ships' holds filled with all manner of goods. The port's success depended on men like Salvesen, who understood both the risks of the sea and the intricacies of international markets. In 1872, after years of careful expansion, Christian Salvesen struck out on his own, establishing his independent firm on Bernard Street, Leith. The timing was no accident. Steamships were transforming maritime trade, opening new routes to German and Baltic ports in the wake of the Franco-Prussian War. Salvesen's new company quickly adapted, investing in modern vessels and building a reputation for reliability. The business model was simple but ambitious: own the ships, control the cargo, and serve as a trusted broker between Scotland and Scandinavia. Behind the numbers and contracts was a sense of place, Leith's docks, the constant churn of goods, and the ambition of an immigrant determined to make his mark. Christian Salvesen's early years were not about grand gestures, but about persistence, adaptation, and a keen eye for opportunity. These foundations would prove essential when the company faced the far riskier waters of the whaling industry, and later, the uncharted territory of Britain's cold chain revolution. In 1891, Christian Salvesen made a decision that would define its future and risk everything it had built. The company purchased its first whaling vessel, stepping into a world dominated by Norwegian expertise and fierce competition. This was no gradual expansion, it was a leap into an industry where fortunes could be made or lost with a single season's catch. The architect of this bold move was Theodore Salvesen, Christian's son, who saw opportunity where others hesitated. The timing was not accidental. Across Europe, demand for whale oil was soaring. Factories needed it for soap and margarine, lamps burned it for light, and heavy industry used it for lubrication. Whale oil was so valuable it was sometimes called liquid gold, but entering the business meant facing established Norwegian fleets and the unpredictable violence of the open sea. Theodore understood the scale of the risk. Buying a whaling ship required capital and nerve. The company would have to recruit crews willing to brave Arctic storms, invest in new technology, and learn the trade from scratch. It was a gamble that could bankrupt the firm, or transform it into something far larger than a Scottish shipping house. The first Salvesen whaling vessels sailed out in 1891, not from the safety of Leith's docks, but into northern waters where profit came at the cost of danger. The company's ledgers began to fill with new entries, casks of oil, barrels of blubber, contracts for processing and shipping. Each line told a story of ambition and of a family business willing to reinvent itself to meet industrial demand. This decision would open the door to the Antarctic, where Salvesen would build an empire on the edge of the world. But in 1891, none of that was certain. All that existed was the willingness to take a risk that most would have considered reckless, a risk that would propel the company from the crowded docks of Leith to the icy reaches of the Southern Ocean. At the far edge of the world, Christian Salvesen built an industrial empire from ice and ambition. By 1909, the company had established its crown jewel, Leith Harbour, South Georgia, a remote base named after their Scottish home port. Here, the Antarctic wind lashed rows of corrugated sheds, oil tanks, and the massive slipways where whales were hauled from the sea. The station's scale was staggering. It had engine shops, cooperatives, and barracks for hundreds of men, all engineered to process thousands of tons of blubber each season. Salvesen's reach did not end at South Georgia. The company operated a base in the West Falklands, hunting further south as whale stocks in the North Atlantic dwindled. From these outposts, a fleet of steel catchers fanned out across the Southern Ocean, each vessel bristling with harpoons and radio masts. By 1914, the fleet counted 2 factory ships, 5 supply ships, and 18 whale catchers, a logistical machine unrivaled in British whaling. The company's real innovation came at sea. In the late 1920s, Salvesen introduced the stern ramp, a simple but revolutionary idea. Instead of towing whales back to shore, factory ships could now winch their catch directly onto the deck, where teams of men, often working round the clock, rendered blubber into oil. This leap in efficiency meant that the hunt could push ever deeper into Antarctic waters, following the great whale migrations wherever they led. Wartime demand gave the business new urgency. Whale oil was essential for explosives, lubricants, and food production. During both World Wars, Salvesen's ships supplied the raw material for everything from soap to munitions. The company's records show a surge in output, with factory ships and support vessels pressed into government service. In these years, the whaling fleet was not just a commercial asset, but a strategic one, vital to Britain's war effort. Behind the numbers was a culture of engineering prowess and logistical control. Every season brought new challenges, shifting ice, mechanical breakdowns, and outbreaks of disease. But the company's managers, many trained in Leith or Aberdeen, kept the Antarctic machine running. At its height, Leith Harbour was a city unto itself, complete with hospital, schoolroom, and chapel, a testament to both engineering ingenuity and the relentless drive for profit. From the icy decks of the Southern Ocean to the bustling quays of Leith, Christian Salvesen's whaling operation stood as one of the most formidable industrial systems of its time. But even as the company reached its operational peak, the limits of the industry, overfishing, environmental strain, and changing markets were already casting long shadows across the ice. The world that had once made Christian Salvesen a titan of whaling was changing fast. In 1946, as memories of wartime scarcity still lingered, the International Whaling Commission was created. For the first time, global quotas and conservation rules put hard limits on the hunt. The company, once free to chase migrating herds across thousands of miles, now faced a future shaped by government decree and international negotiation. Each year, the quotas tightened. Whale populations were falling and the catch grew smaller, even as the costs of each expedition soared. The days of easy profit were gone, replaced by a new reality where every barrel of oil was harder to earn. But the real blow came not from the sea, but from the laboratory. By the early 1950s, synthetic alternatives to whale oil, hydrogenated vegetable oils, and petroleum-based lubricants began to take over the markets that had once depended on the whalers' catch. Soap makers and food factories, once loyal buyers, shifted to cheaper, more reliable substitutes. The price of whale oil fell, and with it, the foundation of Salvesen's Antarctic empire. Inside the company, the numbers told a stark story. Quotas cut into annual production. Synthetic oils eroded demand year after year. The cost of maintaining distant stations in South Georgia and running factory ships through treacherous seas could no longer be justified by shrinking returns. The boardroom debates grew sharper, but the conclusion was inescapable. The whaling business, which had built the company's fortune and identity, was no longer sustainable. In 1963, Christian Salvesen ended its whaling operations for good. The last factory ships were sold, the stations shuttered, and the company closed the book on nearly 3/4 of a century spent chasing whales from the Arctic to the Antarctic. The decision was not made lightly, but it was clear-eyed and final. The era of Scottish whaling was over. What remained was a company still searching for purpose. The skills that once kept the Antarctic fleet running, engineering, logistics, cold storage, would soon find new uses. But the world Salvesen had dominated was gone, swept away by regulation, science, and the limits of nature itself. The next chapter would demand something entirely different, a leap into an industry no one could have predicted from the decks of a whaling ship. A refrigerated truck idles outside a supermarket loading bay. The driver, cap pulled low, checks his route sheet. Grimsby Depot to Leeds, then on to Manchester back before dawn. The work is routine, but the chain behind it is anything but. In 1958, Christian Salvesen acquired the Grimsby Cold Store, at the time the largest of its kind anywhere in the world. This was a company that had once chased whales in the Southern Ocean. Now it was chasing freshness, reliability, and scale in a new kind of race, keeping Britain's food cold from dockside to dinner table. The investment in Grimsby was only the beginning. Across the country, Salvesen poured resources into building a national network of refrigerated depots, each one linked by a growing fleet of temperature-controlled lorries. By the mid-1970s, thousands of trucks carried the Salvesen name, making daily runs from cold stores to supermarket distribution centres and high street shops. The names on the contracts read like a map of British retail: Sainsbury's, Tesco, Asda. Drivers became the lifeblood of the operation. Their shifts were measured not in miles but in hours. Fresh fish from the docks, frozen peas from the fields, ready meals for the city, all delivered before the sun came up. Inside each depot, the mechanics of the cold chain were as precise as any shipboard operation. Forklifts moved pallets from chilled bays to waiting trailers. Staff checked temperatures, logged arrivals, and managed stock that could never be allowed to thaw. The company's expertise in cold storage, once honed on Antarctic blubber, became the backbone of Britain's food supply. For most people, the name on the side of the lorry meant little, but every week millions of meals depended on the quiet efficiency of a business that had learned to master both ice and time. In the mid-1980s, Christian Salvesen reached a level of scale and influence that few could have imagined when the company first set sail from Leith. The decision to float on the London Stock Exchange in 1985 brought a wave of new capital, fueling expansion across Western Europe. Suddenly, a firm once known for shipping and whaling was a public company. Its shares traded alongside Britain's best-known brands. The influx of investment did not just pay for more trucks or bigger warehouses, it allowed Salvesen to think continentally, building a logistics network that stretched from the Scottish Highlands to the Spanish border. By the early 1990s, the company's ambitions took another leap. In 1993, Salvesen acquired Swift Services, a major British transport group, for £84 million. This move cemented its reputation as a powerhouse in cold chain logistics, capable of serving supermarket giants, food producers and manufacturers on a scale few rivals could match. At its height, Salvesen operated in 7 European countries, employing over 13,000 people. Its lorries became a familiar, if barely noticed, presence on motorways and at supermarket depots, quietly ensuring that groceries, frozen meals and fresh produce reached shelves on time and in perfect condition. The company's public listing and rapid growth brought both opportunity and vulnerability. With each acquisition and new contract, expectations rose. Investors demanded returns, supermarkets pressed for lower prices and faster service. Salvesen's reach had never been greater, but the pressure to keep growing and to stay ahead of the competition became relentless. The very visibility that came with being a market leader exposed the company to risks that would soon test the limits of its adaptability. Supermarket giants began joining forces, pooling their buying power and demanding ever lower prices from suppliers. The world Christian Salvesen once dominated was now crowded with rivals willing to undercut at every turn. Names like Wincanton, Tibbet and Britain and Excel moved quickly, offering razor-thin margins and promising speed that left little room for error. Every new contract came with tougher terms, longer payment cycles, penalties for missed deliveries, and promises of volume that could vanish overnight. The company's national network, once a source of strength, now became a battlefield where cost-cutting ruled. As the retail sector consolidated, a single lost contract could mean the closure of an entire depot. Salvesen's boardroom debates grew more urgent. Pressure mounted to slash rates, automate depots and squeeze more from every mile. The old assurances of steady work and loyal customers no longer held. Each quarter brought more aggressive bids from competitors, and the company that had weathered the collapse of whaling now found itself fighting to hold ground in a market where price was king. The stakes were no longer about expansion, but survival. In December 2007, Christian Salvesen was sold to the French logistics giant Norbert Dentressangle. The deal closed with little fanfare, no headlines, no public tributes, just a line in the business pages and a transfer of shares. Within weeks, the familiar blue and white Salvesen name vanished from trucks and depots across Britain. Red Norbert Dentressangle livery replaced more than a century and a half of Scottish heritage almost overnight. Drivers who had spent their careers under the Salvesen badge found their uniforms and paperwork changed before the winter was out. The company's headquarters in Edinburgh, once the nerve centre of a national operation, fell silent as management and staff were absorbed or let go. Legal filings show the old company names dissolved by March 2008, their records boxed and archived. By the spring, the only trace of Salvesen on British roads was a fading sticker or a forgotten depot sign. A business that had outlasted whaling, survived world wars, and helped build the modern supermarket supply chain disappeared with barely a ripple. The cold chain kept moving, the groceries kept arriving, but the name that had once meant reliability from the Antarctic to Aberdeen was gone. In the space of a few months, one of the most important companies most people never heard of became invisible, its story ending not with collapse, but with erasure. Today, Britain's food shelves stay stocked by invisible networks, but few recall the company that once built their foundations. Christian Salvesen pulled off one of the most unlikely pivots in British business, yet even survival wasn't enough. In an era where vital industries vanish without fanfare, their story is a reminder. Sometimes being essential and being remembered are worlds apart. What other giants are we forgetting?